Well, hello everybody again. Jonathan, good to have you in a slightly different capacity, right? So what we wanted to do is, we've been always talking about the forward-looking. OpenStack is this and that, and it's going there, and that's the vision and all that. And I don't think we've ever done kind of an informal investigation about how did it all start, right? And we're going to avoid a difficult question as who was really the founder of OpenStack, because I think it's a treacherous subject. But maybe there are some stories you can share that nobody else knows, and we'll promise to keep it, inside this room.
Okay. I see the red light on the camera back there.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yep.
Well, first, let me just kind of, ask. You were at Rackspace originally, right? And you were one of the first 20 employees. So just tell us, just as a precursor to this discussion,
Yeah, I started at Rackspace very early on in Rackspace's history, and then with a coworker at Rackspace started a company that was attempting to. Rackspace was focused on server technology and managed servers, and I started a company that was focused on kind of taking a bunch of servers and making them work together and automating them, because my background was as an application developer. And at Rackspace, we had free servers and for employees, up to a limit. And the thing is,
that was before Bitcoin time, right?
Yes. But servers are a pain, and the more servers you have, the more things that are constantly going wrong, and you have to make sure they're backed up and patched and secured. And I was like, I don't want to do any of this, and I'm sure that nobody who's writing software wants to do any of this. So how can we automate more of this and do more of that at the software layer? So we started a company to do that, and ended up bringing it back into Rackspace. Became the Rackspace Cloud, and we acquired some other companies and kind of put all of this together into what was the Rackspace portfolio circa 2008, 2009.
Okay.
And at that time, one of the companies that we had acquired was a company called SliceHost. And one of the founders of SliceHost, Jason Seitz, he had built a system for automating their infrastructure and their provisioning of virtual machines and virtual servers. He was a really smart guy, engineer, and also a good business head on his shoulders too. And he started talking with Mark Collier about this technology that we had been creating to run on top of servers to build these systems, and they started kind of kicking around the idea of open sourcing some of it.
Okay.
So this was in 2009, and in December of 2009, and Mark Collier, for those of you who know Mark, which I know a lot of you do, he loves a big idea that he can go get excited about, and this was something that he thought was actually a really great opportunity and a great time for where the industry was to sort of go out and create something that would provide an open source system for cloud management. And so that was kind of where we had gotten to at the end of 2009, beginning of 2010.
Interesting. And so now when we look at the history of OpenStack, everybody knows that OpenStack has been launched by NASA and Rackspace. And NASA has open sourced its Nova, the compute engine, and Rackspace, open sourced its Swift, which is the object storage, and that's how OpenStack came about. So you have essentially a real estate company, right? Because Rackspace at the time was mostly caged hosting, doing very well and differentiating by great fanatical support, and the government agency decided to create an open source, So first of all, how did NASA come to think? Yeah. And then how was it, two questions. One was, how was it working with a government agency, and how did it come together? And then the second is, how did you convince the Rackspace board to give anything away?
Yeah. So I'll answer the second question first, because that kind of came first in the sequence. At the beginning of 2010, some of the senior leaders at Rackspace, they believed that this is really something that we should do. So we started the process of looking at our IP, looking at what kind of code we would release. We looked at the existing version of software that we were running for our compute side of it, and we decided that what we wanted to do was launch a new open source community. We had recently re-architected and rebuilt our object storage system, and so we wanted to release that, and we had just started an effort to re-architect kind of the second generation of cloud servers, of the compute side of it. And so the idea was that we would launch this, try to get some community interest in it, and really build the second generation in the open as we went along. So in doing that, because we were kind of looking at redoing the first iteration of cloud servers, we went around and we looked at some existing open source systems and different technology pieces to see what might be a good basis, or if there was anything that we could work with. And we had to, at this point, we had convinced the Rackspace board of directors that open sourcing was going to be a net positive for Rackspace, and that it was something that they could get behind. But I think they didn't fully understand, what that meant totally at that time. But then somebody that we talked to said, well, I've heard that there's a team at Moffett Field, at the Ames Research Center at NASA, which is right here, that is working on something similar. You should talk to them. So Jim Curry sent an email to Chris Kemp, who was the CTO for IT at NASA, and he responded right back and was like, "This is, we'd love to talk." And so we hopped on a call, and we really didn't know what to expect, but he had a couple of technical team members join the call, Jesse Andrews and I think Josh McKenty, and I can't remember who else was on that first call. And we just started telling them what we were thinking and kind of the route we were going, and they were really excited about it. And they said, well, when can we get together to talk about this? And Jim, Jim is like always ready to go too. He said, well, why don't we fly out there tomorrow? And I think we ended up flying out there, a few days later. But we flew a handful of our developers out to Ames Research Center. We met with the NASA development team, and we sat down and we started talking about what we were thinking. They told us, what they had done, which was kind of this first iteration of Nova, a Python compute controller. And as we were drawing on whiteboards, we realized we had made a lot of the same architectural, at least directionally, a lot of the same architectural decisions independently. We had chosen a number of the same technology frameworks independently, and it just seemed like a great match. So we had this really great meeting. We were all really excited, and then we went to dinner at a Thai restaurant around here, and had a great chat over dinner. And we're just going like, how is this happening so quickly? This is awesome. We get to the end of dinner, and they bring out the check. And Jim Curry, being the corp dev guy that he is, he reaches for the check, and he's gonna pick up the meal, and there are all these NASA people that are like, no. I'm a government employee. I work for NASA, so I have to pay my share. And then they're like, well, I'm a government contractor, so I can't be on the NASA part of it. And somebody else is like, well, I'm hoping to be a NASA contractor, but right now I work independently, so I should probably. And I was like, this is just never going to happen. I mean, we can't even pay a dinner bill. How are we going to mix together all of this IP? But we came out of that, and we had already had a launch date and a launch event planned. We had the branding, OpenStack, all the stuff that was done. And what we ended up doing was pushing that back about 2 weeks, because we thought that if we could get what they had built, get their development teams, get some of this other momentum, that it would ultimately be better for OpenStack in the long run. And they went back and pushed extremely hard, inside of the government to get that code released under an Apache license, which had never happened before. This is back in 2010. NASA actually has their own open source license. And so, this was all furious workings over the course of a few weeks. And basically, past the point of when we were supposed to drop the code, we were still waiting on the final approval from legal in DC, got it, and pushed it all out. So in spite of the dinner bill, we did end up getting across the finish line.
Okay, so now looking about a year ahead, and I will straddle back from a year ahead to where you ended. And I'll share kind of a little bit of my reminiscing. In April of 2011, we decided to become an OpenStack company. We were a consultancy doing infrastructure consulting. Through Boris's wisdom, we understood that OpenStack is going to be great. We called Randy Bias and we said, hey, we have some smart guys. Do we have any projects for us? And Randy from Cloud Scaling gave us our first customer, Internap. And we said, OK, we're now an OpenStack consultancy. And we announced it. And about a week later, we get a call. And a secretary there in the office comes to my office and says, hey, we have a call. And I kind of vetting it. He says he's a CTO at NASA. Is it a prank or should I connect? And I go, well, NASA, OpenStack, yeah, let me talk. And 10 minutes later, I was talking to NASA, and they said, you're in Mountain View. How about we have a meeting tomorrow? And a week later, we had NASA as our second customer. So that's how things were happening at the time. But the story is the first anniversary of OpenStack, which is July of 2011. I'm going to a meetup, and it's a room about maybe a fifth of this, and it's fairly packed. And there is Josh McEntee and Chris Kemp, and they're talking about how OpenStack started and their own personal journeys and all that. And there's all those excited developers who are just like drooling with excitement. And the guys are telling stories, and I'm a little bit of an outsider. We're like 3 months into it, and we're becoming an OpenStack company from outside in. And I'm thinking to myself, OpenStack is 1 year old, and these guys who are founders of OpenStack have the fame of Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. How did it happen in 1 year? Are things happening so quickly? So now going back to you. So you've open sourced it, and there were other open source technologies. There was OpenNebula, there was CloudStack, Eucalyptus. Technologically, they were advanced. Why is it that a year later, this whole thing was taking off?
Yeah.
How did that magic happen?
Yeah, that's probably the most common question we get, because it's not always what happens with open source projects, and I think that you can never pinpoint exactly why anything happens, but I do think there were a couple of things that we did that were a little different. One of the things that we did very, very early on, from the very beginning with the launch, is that Mark Collier and Brett Pyatt at Rackspace, in pitching the board of directors at Rackspace, we were a publicly traded company, that we should basically release this IP and invite our competitors, invite other people to see what we're doing and to be able to do the same thing. One of the goals that they set was to have other companies that would commit to contributing and participating in the environment. And it was really, kind of like traditional biz dev sort of thing that you would do if you're building a platform. You're going to go get software to run on top of it. But open source projects haven't traditionally put a lot of effort into that approach of biz deving contribution resources into their community. And I think that the fact that OpenStack was really started by 2 users of the software versus a company that wanted to commercially own the software, even if it was available under an open source license, was something that made it appealing and possible for other companies to come in and participate. And if you look at some of the other software that was out there at the time, most of them did have kind of a single entity that was trying to really own it commercially. And I think that just made it hard for a lot of people to feel welcome and like they could come get involved. And that community momentum mass creates gravity, and that community mass created a lot of gravity that continued to just bring in additional contributors and users and keep it going.
I guess there was a huge pent-up demand for this, and to validate what you're saying, the reason we selected OpenStack is exactly that. Boris said it has to be open source, and there has to be no vendor controlling, the bulk of it. And so we looked across the whole thing. We said OpenStack is the only thing, and then we just made a decision to become an OpenStack company. And a whole bunch of engineers in our company looked at this and said, the management don't know what they're doing, and it's not the best technology, and it's never going to work. And 10% of our people quit based on that. So, they thought we should have chosen CloudStack. And of course, the reason we didn't is because it was, was a great technology, but it was completely dominated by Citrix. And so I'm sure there were some stories. I mean, Citrix was in and then out and then in again. I mean, what's the Citrix? What's the skinny there?
So some of those we'll have to save for OpenStack top secret. It was interesting because Citrix, they came in early on and were participating and contributing, and they were building a product around OpenStack, and then they did the CloudStack acquisition, and they looked at how to try to sort of combine some of those efforts, or push some of it into OpenStack or whatever, and I think it just didn't make sense for them. But it was really funny, because that was the sort of like hot controversy back in 2011 and 2012 was what's going on with these, and people used to talk about it all the time. We don't really think about it then. But one of the things that I do remember happening, is they had been involved in OpenStack, and we're looking at participating in the foundation. We were launching it in 2012, and then kind of went quiet on us until about a week before the foundation launch, when CloudStack suddenly ended up in the Apache Software Foundation, and we never really heard any more from Citrix about joining the OpenStack Foundation
until much later when they did.
until 2 years later.
Interesting. So. Okay, so you guys did a spectacular job as Rackspace building up the community, and there was all those players and all those vendors also trying to kind of, fight for position. And again, an anecdote that I remember is we kind of went, live as Mirantis, as an OpenStack company, with a controversial, play on our Russian heritage. And Boris, of course, is our marketing head of controversy, created the slogan and set of T-shirts that said, "In Soviet Russia, cloud deploys you," with hammer and sickle in the middle and all that. And as somebody who came from the Soviet Union as a refugee and wasn't very enamored by that, I went to Boris and I said, "Boris, I'm not sure this is the right thing to do. We're going to offend a lot of people." And Boris looked me in the eye and said, "The people who will get offended will be, the old farts like you, and they're completely irrelevant to what we're trying to do. Now, the cool people will actually get it, and so, get out of the way. I'm running marketing, and we're going to do it." And I go, "Okay." And so we went to Cloud Connect with this thing, and I'm there at the booth, and there were a couple of people who were old farts like me who were offended, but the rest of it loved it. And then, a year later, we're launching the foundation, and there is probably 2,000 people in the room, and Mark Collier, comes, to the stage, and he is wearing a Mirantis T-shirt. "In Soviet Russia, the cloud deploys you." He goes, "This is the coolest T-shirt," and we're going to launch the foundation with that. And I go, "Boris, I give up. You're right again." So the foundation. Mm-hmm. So how did again? OpenStack was hot. And when something is hot, and there's a real estate group that owns an asset, like Rackspace Board of Directors, how would they still let it go when it's hot? And how did you, the old-time racker, end up in the foundation and not be considered that the foundation, Rackspace is trying through you to, how do you keep the credibility of the foundation?
Yeah. So when we launched this, the thing that is really interesting is, we thought that there would be some interest in it and other people would participate, but we actually did a slide deck for the initial pitch to the board of directors. and opportunities and risks and that kind of thing. And the number one risk that was in that on the potential downside of open sourcing our code and launching OpenStack was no one will care. And we really thought we might launch it and nobody would care, and we would just be having to try to manage an open source community and taking on that extra overhead without anything else happening. But obviously, that was not the outcome. And so about a year and a half in, we started to have other companies that began financially supporting OpenStack community events, the summits. There were a lot of other contributors now. And people started saying, well, where's this going to be long term? And so we put together a plan to create an independent foundation. And it was interesting because at the time there was a team of about 4 or 5 of us in Rackspace. And that team only worked on OpenStack. And we were pretty protective of it internally and externally. And so you're right, like externally people would say, oh, well, you guys are just, you're just going to give Rackspace special privileges. And internally, people at Rackspace would say, why can't we say this about OpenStack? Why can't we use the logo? And as we went through the process of creating the foundation, we were really clear that it was going to be equal footing, that it wasn't going to be a situation where Rackspace had a permanent board seat or 10% of the board or whatever. It was going to be open to everybody that was going to participate in an equal way, and so that was actually one of the things that, going back to the board again, we had to explain why that was going to be good for Rackspace, because like you said, I think the first time around they didn't necessarily think it was going to have a huge impact. So they were OK with launching it, and then it turned out to...
It's actually valuable, so
yeah.
keep it in.
And so now we're saying, well, no, you have to let it go, and no, you don't get any special access or privileges. And in the board meeting, Lou Mormon said, well, because this was pretty far along in that process, and people in the community had been asking for some of us to go to the foundation to run it and to work there. And so Lou told the board, he's like, well, this also means that some of these people are going to be leaving Rackspace. Like Jonathan, is probably going to leave and go to the foundation if they, if the foundation board approves that. And so if he does that, we're going to have to sever all ties. And I was like, Lou, I thought we were friends. I've been working with you for 10 years. But it was interesting because they did take it very seriously. But at the end of the day, there was a group of Rackers that I think really understood that when markets are going through transformations, like what Martine was talking about, disruption is going to happen. And you can either pretend that it's not happening and hope to just milk that cash cow as long as you can, or you can acknowledge that it's going to happen and figure out how you can disrupt yourself in a way that lets you benefit from the change to the greatest extent possible. And I think that was what they ultimately saw.
Well, and you guys doing it for real, meaning letting go means letting go, is what caused this thing. When people believed it, that's what caused the whole inflection that we're seeing. So as a chairman of the OpenStack finance committee, I can tell you that it's the largest OpenStack open source budgeted open source foundation by far. I mean, I think we're like more than double the budget of Linux Foundation that's been around almost 30 years. So it just shows that there is a lot of
I think Linux Foundation might have a speak, but I think that's the only one.
Well, it maybe have not on the budget. It has maybe broader uptake, but on the budget, I don't know. But yeah, it's huge, and it's only 6 years. So. All right, so my last question to you, because we are running out of time, is, so you've been an entrepreneur, and then you ran a fairly significant business, and now you're a nonprofit guy. So, whenever I look around, I see you traveling and making speeches, and Mark is doing the same thing. And so what's life like in nonprofit, and any personal, confidential, juicy story you can share about what this life entails?
Yeah, we do travel a lot. It's actually one of the things that is nice, because running a nonprofit is very different than running a business. but we get to go talk to a lot of operators and users and people who are building businesses around OpenStack and stay in touch with that. We travel all over the world, though, and one funny story that I think, I'm going to tell a story about Mark that I think he won't mind. But you travel a lot, and you travel internationally, and you cross the oceans enough times, and you end up with this thing called jet lag. A couple of years ago, we had an event, and I think it was in Paris. And the way we try to do this is like the tour that I talked about earlier. We try to bunch a number of cities together so we can hit them all at once. Earlier this year, we did like Istanbul, Tel Aviv, Budapest, Prague, Dublin all at once. And then usually the way it works is different people on the team kind of come in for a segment of it, and we trade in and out. So Lauren Sell, who's our VP at the foundation, we had been to an event, and then we went to Paris for this event, and Mark flew in for the event in Paris, and he was supposed to be speaking and doing the keynote there. And so he wanted to make sure that he got sleep on the flight over, so he took an Ambien on the plane, and on his red-eye flight, made it to the hotel to change and come to the speech, and basically didn't come downstairs. And so Lauren and I were like, okay, where is he? We were able to find him, get him out, get him in a taxi. We show up there barely in time. He's like, okay, I'm ready. Sorry, I had a hard time getting going. And then he got up on stage, and he was talking, and he's giving this keynote. He's going through, he's delivering his points, and then all of a sudden he just kind of stops. And Lauren and I are sitting there, and Lauren's like, I think he's falling asleep. She's like, I think you need to go up there. But then he just kind of like reanimated and went right back into it. And so yes, the travel and the sleep deprivation sometimes has an impact, but overall it's just been incredible to be able to see this community come together. And you're making jokes about founders and people claiming to be founders, and there are a lot of people that definitely had a hand in getting OpenStack started across so many different businesses and aspects of it that it really is impossible to catalog them all. But getting OpenStack started was not the most important thing that we've done. The important thing that has happened is what the community has produced in the 6 years since we got started. And that's what I love, and that's why I still really enjoy the work that we do and feel it's important, and it keeps me passionate and keeps me going.
And you never fall asleep during your keynote, right? And the fact that so many of us can credibly feel that we're all co-founders of OpenStack, I think, is why OpenStack took off, because it was so inclusive, and that's what's so awesome and unique about it. Okay, well, with that, Jonathan, thank you very much.
Thank you.